Story 1. At that time, rather than a single specific site, there were many sites that were much more nuanced, so you would hop around and check in on them almost like subreddits. Newgrounds, Neopets, Ibom's World, MySpace, Microsoft Messenger, Addicting Games, Homestar Runner, Napster, Vine, StickDeath, and many forums. One of my favorites was conceptart.org during its peak. Story 2. I am a geriatric millennial, one of the lucky ones who experienced the influence of late Generation X in music and popular culture. My main interests were AOL chats and message boards, particularly those focused on music. I was also into internet relay chat for a while and spent some time reading on Usenet, but I did not interact there. Story 3. Hotmail before Microsoft acquired it. ICQ before AOL purchased it. Internet Gaming Zone, the leading place to play games on the internet. Internet relay chat. Niche sites running webboard. Story 4. Old school RuneScape and some game forums whose names I can't recall. Honorable mention to Newgrounds and Addicting Games. Story 5. Teen chat was predominantly frequented by older individuals and a few teenagers. Goth.com was a site where I used to type in my interests followed by .com back in the day. I visited this site a lot. I checked recently, and now it is a very simplified and low-quality website. However, back then, it had a dark and spooky vibe with social forums and a poetry section. AOL chat rooms featured profiles like 19/F/New York, blonde hair, blue eyes, 5 feet 6 inches, healthy weight, DD and you? In reality, I was a 13-year-old girl who was not thin. Disney.com is interesting because I was not a huge Disney fan, but I remember playing 2 games. One was a Kim Possible game, and the other involved styling clothes for Miranda from Lizzie McGuire, which may have included doing her nails as well. Yahoo Answers was similar to the AskReddit forum before Reddit gained popularity. Story 6. MySpace was a cool website where we could code our pages. You could set a song on your page, and there were artists who commented to share their music. I still remember the Indonesian band Killing Me Inside with their track, Tormented. Tom was the real one. Story 7. Hosting and downloading from file servers on MIRC. Movies, television shows, adult content, and all the other enjoyable material we still consume. Engaging in arguments on Usenet. We participated in similar activities on bulletin board systems before that. Receiving an insult on FidoNet a month after posting something was quite an experience. Story 8. AIM and LiveJournal, along with various flash sites like Homestar Runner and Newgrounds, are noteworthy. I'm glad I can't find my LiveJournal accounts. Story 9. The amount of time I spent on instant messaging talking to strangers is very surprising to me now. I wouldn't dream of it today. Story 10. After I got home from school, I usually visited game FAQs and participated in the forums. I was banned from that site several times. Then, when YouTube launched, it became my homepage. Story 11. GeoCities Sailor Moon Chat and AOL Gore Chats. I really did not need to be in those spaces as a child. Later on, I used ICQ, which was not nearly as bad as those Wild West GeoCities days. Story 12. Ask Jeeves or Yahoo for searching. MySpace and MSN for communication. StarCraft and Counter-Strike were online games I played. Family Feud, RuneScape, Neopets, Habbo Hotel, and Slime Volleyball were web-based games I played. I watched a lot of Naruto and Bleach, but I remember having to walk away to let them buffer first. I always had a list of web-based comics, but the only one I remember now is real-life comics. There was a Final Fantasy comic with Nuclear in the title. I didn't go on Ibom's World too much, but there were other short cartoon websites I looked at like the Emotion Robots ones. Story 13. Anyone remember Inklink? It was a room for 8 people where each person took a turn drawing a word. We played that game so much in the 2000s. Story 14. I used the chat application Powwow and also utilized internet relay chat for a long time. I still keep in touch with some IRC users I have known since 1998. As a Zennial, I understand this might seem outdated to you. Story 15. When AOL became more inclusive, I spent my time on their Teen People page. During the Titanic craze, I spent a lot of time there. Story 16. Coke Music was essentially a combination of The Sims and Roblox, created by Coca-Cola before the advent of MySpace. It was incredibly enjoyable. Story 17. MMOs for me involved logging in early in the morning before school, chatting with friends, and then heading out only to come back in the evening to talk with guild members or sometimes join the world chat when the conversation was lively. Nowadays, I feel like MMOs have lost that charm, or maybe I just don't have the time I used to. Story 18. Homestar Runner, Fark, YTMND, and Cracked are not examples of the first internet access, but they represent some of the earliest instances of relatively free content on the internet. Story 19. AOL, of course. Everyone played that word game with cherubs that save you. CSMA means cherub saved my ass. What was that game called? It's really going to bug me. Story 20. AOL, Mustang World Forums, Dead Journal, Yahoo chat rooms, and game rooms to name a few. Story 21. I am not sure what it was called, but it was a chat room that resembled a black and white comic book, and whatever you typed would appear in speech bubbles. Story 22. There was a website called Strike Haven Empire, which featured fictional stories inspired by Wing Commander and The Last Starfighter. A guy wrote these stories about his friends, and it turned into a play-by-post role-playing game. We would hang out on ICQ. I was the annoying younger brother who liked to draw spaceships, so my role was head of research and development for the Imperial Fleet. Story 23. My house. My dad was a pioneer at the forefront of the technology revolution and information age, so by the age of 5 or 6, I was coding in 780 assembly or beginner all-symbolic instruction code on old Commodore and TRS-80 computers. I used to obtain games and manuals from peer-to-peer modem newsgroups. By the time dial-up internet became popular, we were focused on the Free America online disks, and I quickly started using AOL Instant Messenger. I received an invitation to Gmail as a beta tester when I was about 14, allowing me to use my first and last name as a username, which I still have today. Then it was drugs and drinking across from my high school, and the rest is history. Story 24. Adventure Quest was my first real PC online game that I played, followed by RuneScape. There were so many addictive game clones. It wasn't even funny. Story 25. I was on Newgrounds playing games or albino black sheep watching funny videos, or on MySpace adjusting my top 10. Most of my time was spent offline, playing Roller Coaster Tycoon and the pinball demo. Story 26. We had no idea how good we had it back then. Story 27. I started out on message boards for the topics I liked. I remember visiting the boards at fox.com, mainly for the show 24 and the Force.net. Story 28. A place called United Underground. I was really into Christian punk music at the time, and that's what United Underground was all about. Story 29. The Palace and Internet Relay Chat. Later AOL Instant Messenger, but at the time it was part of having America Online as an internet service provider. I picked it up once they separated it from the AOL service. Story 30. Yahoo Games, specifically Text Twist, Yahoo Chat, and later on Newgrounds and albino black sheep. I am also quite sure I was creeped on by someone who was exchanging emails with me. At the time, I thought it was totally plausible that the photo he sent me was of himself and not a random K-pop star. However, I was not just an oblivious preteen. I was also the type to say, "No, Dad says I can't give out my phone number on the internet, but we can still email." I would also joke, "Haha, I can't send photos, we don't have a scanner." He stopped replying after a while. Story 31. Blink.no was essentially Norway's version of MySpace and Facebook. There was also a Norwegian site that featured a typing minigame, but I can't remember if it was separate or part of Blink. And of course, there was Newgrounds. Story 32. Yahoo Messenger was probably my first. By high school, it was MSN Messenger and LiveJournal. In my school, no one really used MySpace. We all briefly got into building our own sites on Yahoo GeoCities instead. Story 33. It was a small community that had profiles and online forums. It was basically like MySpace with its profile setup before MySpace became popular. I had some good times and made a lot of friends there. Story 34. AOL and Yahoo chat rooms. Was I the only lonely single in my area? No, I was not. I got tricked into bringing an elderly woman cigarettes. Story 35. I remember the early AOL days when I was about 8 or 9 years old. There was a site called Blackberry Creek that I enjoyed. Story 36. I spent a lot of time on the force.net when I was around 10 years old. I knew everything about Star Wars from 1999 until about 2003. Now I've lost track and I estimate that I have around 64% knowledge about Star Wars. As a teenager, I spent most of my time on the Pink Floyd forum called APFFN and on MySpace. Story 37. StickPage was one I visited often as a kid. Microsoft Network was also very popular when I was in middle school. It wasn't quite an internet hangout spot, but my brother and I downloaded a lot of music on LimeWire. Story 38. I hung out on Maid Marian. Back then, they had multiple 3D-based chats. One was set on a tropical island, and another took place in space where you could use a jetpack. I miss those days. I had many enjoyable nights chatting with random strangers, and even made some friends who were regulars. It's a shame I lost touch with all of them. When those chat rooms were still good, they offered a different experience. Nowadays, the internet feels too wild with the number of creeps and bots. They also had a dungeon crawler role-playing game that was very basic but quite fun. I can't remember the other games they had, though I believe there were a few more. Story 39. In chronological order. Yahoo Messenger at 13. I used to chat in a room called 20s Love, MySpace, High Five, Orkut, Facebook, 2007. Story 40. There was a time when it was easy to ignore politics with no culture wars, allowing people to immerse themselves in what they enjoyed alongside like-minded individuals. Everything was compartmentalized, so no one had to see anything they didn't want to or didn't understand, avoiding the compulsion to comment or start arguments. Those arguments were not considered engagement and were not endlessly encouraged by an algorithm. We allowed those in Silicon Valley to ruin a good thing. Story 41. Some chat rooms in ICQ and then almost instantly MySpace. Boy, I miss MySpace. Can't we fire Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and get Tom back here? We need MySpace as it was. Story 42. Since the classics have already been mentioned, there was a site I frequented as a child that focused on recording and sharing cow-based sound bites. It featured cow puns, mooing in a Chicago gangster accent, and milk jokes. That's all it contained. The absurdity makes me question if it was ever real, but my memories are so vivid that it surely existed. Story 43. AOL Instant Messenger, Newgrounds, Pokemon Crater, RuneScape, Addicting Games, and others. Take me back. I'm begging you. Story 44. I was a good writer at a young age and loved chat rooms. I would visit chat rooms for other countries that weren't my own to ask about various topics, such as wildlife and weather. It was fascinating to be able to ask people questions from anywhere in the world without the need for pen pals. It was quicker than corresponding with a pen pal. Story 45. Yahoo, the main page. During my early teens, I didn't understand the concept of individual web addresses. Additionally, it was a computer at my dad's work. I would get online and knew how to navigate to the video games section to access GameSpot and game FAQs. Story 46. I would not say usual, but I have not been able to find anything as fun as the internet relay chat trivia channels. Story 47. Metal is a genre I lived for as a teenager. I didn't know anyone who shared my passion for this type of music. Meeting and chatting with metal enthusiasts from around the world was mind-blowing to me. Story 48. MSN, ICQ, and IRC Messenger were popular platforms, but there were countless random chat sites. I remember being a young kid and thinking the potential was amazing, with many sites where you could do anything. For example, there was a site with a plain white background where you had to keep clicking to find a cow mooing. It may sound silly now, but combined with a variety of other random sites people talked about, it was great. Now, the internet often feels like a sales company trying to sell you things you don't need. Story 49. Posting the coolest and funniest away messages or lyrics to the best songs of the 2000s. Story 50. RuneScape. I spent too much time on the public library computers. They kicked me off every hour. When Mr. Brightside came out, I played it on repeat. Story 51. LiveJournal offered a better social aspect than MySpace. I used StumbleUpon when I was bored and searching for new content. eBaum's World was my go-to when my parents weren't home during my puberty. Story 52. Game FAQs was significant for a time. The forums were invaluable back in the day. Then there was Break.com, which was akin to YouTube today. Story 53. eBaum's World, Albino Black Sheep, cheat code websites, one manga forums, and MySpace when it finally launched. Story 54. Camfrog had some of the coolest people in the past. Just individuals from all over the world hanging out together, including a lot of amazing deaf individuals. Story 55. Born in 1980, I associate more with millennials. I used to go on Yahoo Messenger, Yahoo Chat, and Yahoo Games. Story 56. I had to double take because when I first saw the title, I thought it said Millennial Predators. And I thought you might be Chris Hansen. Story 57. For me, it was definitely MySpace at first. Then I spent a lot of time on Newgrounds and eBaum's World for funny videos and games. Later, Reddit became my favorite spot. Story 58. I spent a lot of time during my teenage years playing a tabletop role-playing game in an AOL chat room called Parthos. It was somewhat affiliated with AOL, although I never fully understood the nature of the connection. One of my real-life friends also played, and we spent many evenings enjoying the game together. It was great fun. Story 59. I participated in many forums, pet sites, and posting on others' web pages. Everything would indicate how many users were online, and once any forum or pet site had more than 200 users online consistently, I would leave. The only site I remained on until it was no longer active was a pet site called NeuroGalaxy. Story 60. MIRC, ICQ, LiveJournal, Yahoo Games, Literati, Inklink, and going back to the Smashing Pumpkins chat room that I think was based out of a radio station in Pennsylvania. This was from 1997 to 2000, so I can barely remember. I made my first ICQ friends there. Story 61. I was very young when I first learned how to use a computer and we had America Online, so I spent time on America Online Kids. KiddoNet was a favorite of mine, along with Zekasters. In upper elementary school, around age 11 or 12, I used Millsberry, MySpace, and Disney's Virtual Magic Kingdom. Story 62. I remember a specific site with many Flash games. I used to sit in the local library for hours just playing and chatting with random people. Computer and internet access at home came very late compared to others in school. As a single parent on disability, we were not rich by any means. My first computer came from the local recycling station, and I even upgraded a few times using parts recovered from there. In school, people were sharing burned CDs with operating systems and keys, so that was never an issue. I have no idea where those originally came from, but everyone had them, and they always worked like a charm. The first time I qualified for buying on credit while in school, I ordered parts and built a proper rig, which was not exactly the wisest decision. I spent so much time on internet relay chat and playing Counter-Strike 1.6. But I have so much nostalgia for those early 2000s LAN parties. Those were the days. Story 63. Slingo was probably the first. I watched my mom play it, and then she let me start playing. After that, it was between Neopets and Club Penguin. I wanted to be on Toontown, but I was not a wealthy kid. I also played Puzzle Pirates back in the day. I tried playing again recently, but I think they purged my account. Story 64. Downloading wallpapers. I can't remember the website for all the car wallpapers, but I do remember the one with the attractive models. Story 65. Neopets. I was about 11 at the time, and honestly, from what I recall, it was pretty decent at moderating. Story 66. Not a site, but a program, MIRC. Shortly after that, it became one of those early Flash game platforms with multiplayer games and chat functions. Story 67. Newgrounds and eBaum's World were frequently visited. Miniclip games, IGN, and game FAQs were prominent. As a hobbyist musician, I was always browsing Musician's Friend and Zounds. Guitar Tabs was the best tablature website at the time. Story 68. There was no such thing as a hangout site. My family had dial-up, so I only had access for a specific task, and it was turned off as soon as it was done. Story 69. Goof Central was a website created by a classmate. It featured a collection of meme videos, flash animations, and browser games. Nexopia was my social media platform. Story 70. AOL had a chat room where I spent a lot of time engaging and sharing my chat logs on online forums. They still go viral occasionally, and it's strange to see others taking credit for them. My wife is aware of this, but she believes that people can change. Story 71. Kids area. They had a prom inside the chat rooms, and I was so frustrated that I couldn't go because my parents took me on vacation. Oh, those lovely chat rooms where, at 8 years old, I pretended I was 16 and attractive, interacting with what I now realize were men. There was also a site where I spent my later years in high school hanging out. Instead of being a typical teenager, I was talking to other kids about which character from Jimmy Neutron they would date. Story 72. Microsoft Network, Miniclip, addicting games, not really a hangout site, but I remember using LimeWire extensively. Oh, and a lot of RuneScape. Story 73. Before Reddit, I spent a lot of time on Internet Movie Database message boards. I loved discussing movies and actors with people. Story 74. Messaging service network for chatting with friends. MySpace for staying updated on friends. Newgrounds and addicting games for videos and games. After a while, I also checked out YouTube and teenage bloggers. Story 75. FOL is an online fantasy role-playing forum. It was magical back then. If you missed a weekend, you would need people to fill you in on what happened. Story 76. TVChicks.com was the first cross-dressing site I found that had forums and a chat room, allowing me to connect with other cross-dressing individuals. Growing up in the 90s, there were no indications that other queer people existed, so having an actual chat room to greet friends was significant. Story 77. From Something Awful to Fark. With his trusty watermark, he stole and stuck it all on. Story 78. Text-based role-playing games or multi-user dungeons. In particular, Aelenor's Nexus and Ababaran, the Forsaken Lands. I wish I could go back to when those communities were thriving. Story 79. I focused on gaming, particularly from Counter-Strike 1.5 to 1.6. I don't recall using the internet for much else. Even my school assignment to create a website was centered around Half-Life. I also had AOL and Windows Live Messenger, but again, my attention was primarily on gaming. Story 80. Not really a hangout, but MSN Messenger was very popular back in the day, well before Google and Facebook. Story 81. Dizzler became well known in 2008 with Dizzler Chat. It was a great time to be a teenager. Story 82. Heavy, which became Newgrounds. Eric conveys an emotion. Gaming Force Audio and Gaming Force Forums. Story 83. Here in Sweden, it was Lunarstorm, similar to Facebook for kids before Facebook became popular. Featured chats, games, and more. Story 84. Chat rooms, Yahoo Chat, ICQ Messenger, and Yahoo Games. I am not a millennial, and I often get confused about the years that define each generation. Story 85. Not a website, but a massively multiplayer online game. Wizard 101. The Commons outside the Headmaster's Tower at around 3 a.m. All the fun people gathered nightly. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.